people love the world of consulting, but they don't really know what it entails. A typical day of consulting, if I summarize it, it's the excitement of going into an unknown. After I finished university, I didn't directly jump into my first job. And I remember the peer pressure because the others were going, what are you going to do next if you don't choose this path? I want to study a little more because I was truly inspired in the world of computers. I knew there would be points later on in my career where I might not have the frequency to be with family. And so I had to make a decision whether I would continue where I was or whether I should move closer to home. That's where what was the value of taking the time to do the course really paid out.
My perspective as cyber is when you do it well, no one knows what you do.
Yep.
And when it goes wrong, everyone knows what you do.
Do not sell cyber from the point of fear. Cyber is about helping the business run faster.
Maybe a strange question. If you weren't in security, what would you be doing in tech right now?
It's funny.
Sunil Rane, an experienced CISO at Serve, whose journey through the realms of finance, banking, oil and gas, telecommunication, and government have been nothing short of remarkable. With a wealth of experience garnered from challenging projects at Sagacity, Protiviti, and KPMG, Sunil has established himself as a trusted leader in tech and cybersecurity. In our conversation today, Sunil shares invaluable insights into his career path, the profound impact of his educational experiences on his professional trajectory, and the significance of taking career breaks to pursue specialist courses. Sunil, welcome to Tales from Tech Titans. I'm really excited today to learn about your journey to CISO.
Okay.
I did see on your LinkedIn that it looked like you went to high school in Kuwait.
Yep.
And University of India.
Yeah.
So I was sort of trying to decipher this in preparation. So I'm just curious, sort of tell me a bit more about your kind of early years. Where were you born and sort of where did you grow up?
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, Anton. This will be a good conversation, hopefully. But what I'm really curious to see, hearing some of the podcasts prior to this, is your investigative journalism to this. So be keen to do. But I was reflecting on this on the way here today to just think about my experience and how it all came to be. I think, and I'm sure most of us have had this, we've had some really amazing mentors and people that I've looked up to, and all of us have. And for me, growing up, I think I grew up in Kuwait, you're right.
Yeah.
I was born there. And the reason was my parents. They moved at a very early age from a career perspective. Very hardworking parents. And I picked a lot of those traits from them. And you'll see that through my career as we speak about it.
Yeah.
So born in Kuwait very early on in my days. It's based on how my parents brought us up. They let me and my sister basically just explore the world through how we would explore it. And that has a lot of connections again to career. But yeah, growing up in my very early years, the first part and the inspiration was my parents and the opportunity they gave us to explore. It didn't matter what we tried growing up, whether it was on the playground, trying different things, whether it was trying things at home. Even with the toys that we had, one of the things I used to do was, and I was very bad at this growing up, was I would buy something, especially if it was electronic, and I'd open it up with the promise that I'd be able to put it back together. But my parents knew that I wouldn't be able to do that. But that started the curiosity of looking into things and seeing really what's under the hood. That was my early years and the inspiration there from my parents to allow me to explore. I think from there, as I got into school, I had some amazing teachers, and I really say this to everyone. I think our truest inspiration comes from what you learn at school, university, and the inspirations you get from there. So I had, and I really till this day keep in touch with her. My school teacher. The one that I really remember is Merlin Korean. And if you're watching or listening to this, thank you. I can't thank you enough for the amount of support you've given. But she, again, had the idea with anyone that she taught to allow them to explore. So it's the same theme, again, from parents to growing up. again, whatever I wanted to do in school, my approach to studying, how I'd look at things, how I'd want to explore a certain topic or a subject came again very strongly from her, because she inspired to go and try things differently. It wasn't, here's something that you've got to learn, and not follow the approach of textbook.
Yeah.
It's go and explore. I'd come back often with ideas to say, hey, I think we should try this, or here's something I've learned. And she said, that's great. What did you learn? And so again, I think this theme continues, which is the idea to explore.
That's interesting. So I'm going to ask a question, if that's okay. So was that an international high school?
It was, yes.
So you had kind of people from all around the world.
All around the world.
So that would have been interesting at such a young age, and probably quite impactful, mixing with people from different cultures.
Yeah, and it's funny. I know there's a big theme about culture and having people mix and interact with each other, and you get a lot of value when you get a mix of different perspectives, and of course culture is one part of it. But I never really saw that growing up, because when I grew up, it was growing up in a culture that was already with such a big discipline of people from different backgrounds, and so for me that was just normal. But now when I reflect on it, when those were some of the forming years where you'd get people with different ideas and approaches to the same thing, as simple as what you'd have for lunch, and you'd be again inquisitive, and you'd ask the questions, and then today when you look back at that really had impact, because you go, right, that's what a different culture would do. Yeah. That's how things, gives you a perspective of how people approach things differently. So yeah, it has had a big impact early. I never thought of it that way, because I just grew up.
That's right. You didn't know any different.
Yeah.
I would imagine as well, I'm trying to think of timing wise, but that was a pretty tough time for that part of the world. Early 90s, Kuwait invaded by Iraq, leading to that conflict. I'm guessing this was a few years on from that, but I'd imagine it would have been a fair degree of instability in the region.
Yeah, and we were. My sister and I were very young, and I still remember the Gulf War, which was in the 90s, and I think we were probably, this is showing my age now, but grade 2 or grade 3. Yeah. And what we'd often do, and parents were migrant parents, the first time in an international country, and our holidays used to be going back home. And for us, for my parents' home was back in India. And I still remember this day very distinctly, even though it was quite some time back, is we came back from a holiday after visiting my grandparents, and it was August 1st, 1990. And then August 2nd was when the war broke out. And we had no idea. We'd just flown in, wake up the next day, and we see helicopters flying around. We're going, what is going on? And they're all military helicopters. Yeah. Now, at that point, when I looked at it and heard my mom and dad making phone calls and just checking in with family and everyone else, for my sister and I, it was, okay, we don't have to go to school today. It's just an innocent reaction to going, hey, we've just come back from a holiday. It was supposed to be a school day, and we just went, this is great, there's no school. But only later realizing the impact, because instantly the currency value of Kuwait was zero. Yeah. Instantly you wouldn't, and we had just come back, so we didn't have a stockpile of food or resources, and so there was nothing at home. And things, again, I'm very thankful to my parents, but I remember my dad calling up a friend of his and going, we're going to go to the supermarket. And at that point, all the different stores and hospitals were guarded by the Iraqis, which was the invading force. But they took the risk, and it was such a risk at that point, because there was no rules. And my dad, and I still think to that day, and I talked to my dad about it. It would have been such a point of deciding between helping support the family, versus going out and the risk of not coming back. Yeah. Thankfully, that situation was not too bad. Dad came home, had food for all of us. But again, yes, it was very unstable. There was no point at when the war broke out as to what would happen to us. Would we remain? Would we move? Could there be more serious implications? But all I do remember is how my parents, through that journey, made sure that we felt safe. Yeah. and always communicated to us in a way that we would be happy as a family, and we had the support we need. Never at any point did we feel that there was no access to food. But knowing now and talking to my parents, I went, wow, that would have been an absolutely chaotic time.
Yeah.
And now reflecting on those points, I go, yeah. So it's had a lot into my psyche of how I grew up.
Yeah.
It's had a lot into how I think. Is that things could happen at any time, right? And when those happen, how do you be resilient? And how do you reflect and go, look, it's not, the world is still a big place. There's a lot to explore. There's lots of things that are good in this world. So it's always taught me that, the resiliency part of it. So just coming back to that war and the situation. Yeah.
It's interesting there. A couple of themes that you've, between your high school teacher and your parents, you talked there about safety to explore as well.
Yeah.
It's quite clear from your childhood you felt that security and the ability to express yourself, be yourself, which I think is so important to kind of where we end up later in life, which also allows for that resilience too.
It's true.
I did, and thanks for sharing that, by the way, because I imagine that was incredibly impactful on your. It's more so probably now when you look back. 'Cause I believe you're a parent now.
No,
you're not.
Kids.
Okay, no kids yet.
We're dinks, but no kids.
But I think probably once you have kids as well, you look at those moments and you think of exactly what your parents went through as well.
Yeah.
I noticed that so from there you then studied electronics and communications.
Yeah.
So you kind of took your passion for taking every birthday present and dissembling it into your studies.
Yeah.
I was interested. So were your parents kind of involved in engineering or electronics? Was there a kind of an inspiration or influence from what they did, or was it just completely left field?
Yeah, I remember, and there's almost this whole journey of disassembling things when I was very early. I remember getting the first computer at home, and the only reason that came about was so Dad used to do a lot of work in banking. His whole career was in the world of banking. And I remember he saw the first computer being introduced in the banks, and he went, and again, just how my parents thought about things, he went, this is going to change the world.
Yeah.
And computers at that point were not easy things to buy.
Yes.
And so, but he knew that this is going to change the world, so he invested for my sister and I so that we could get access to this new machine or thing that would set fire to the world. But I still remember, this is me tinkering again, where you had someone come in and install. It was these big little computers that you'd have, a desktop, as you call it now, and switch it on, and it booted, I think, Windows 3.1 at the time, or something even older. And then I remember the technician set it all up for us, and the keyboard and the mouse, and then walk away. And the first thing I did was started exploring and went, what are all these files on this computer? I didn't know it was called files then, but for me it sounds like there was a lot of garbage in this computer, and I ended up deleting the operating system.
Yeah, right.
So I just but then I deleted, and it was my promise always as a kid, don't worry, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to get it back. But, we ended up calling the technician. But what I remember is watching in amazement how the technician and what, and funny enough, it was a she, which is my early inception. We're so used to the thing about diversity now, but it was a she that came. She came in, rebooted the computer, set up the operating. But I was just watching and amazed at what she was doing. Again, an inspiration. And so I asked her a lot of questions. She was very patient again. But that got me the start to what is this computer, and how does it actually work and I realized there are two levels to it. There is the machinery, and there's the actual operating system to it. And of course, I did end up opening the computer at the end of it. I couldn't resist myself to see how it actually worked.
Yeah.
But that was the start of.
That's interesting.
And it was. I remember completing grade 12, or at least when I was nearing it. And the question you asked, Anton, is how do I get into engineering? And looking to my parents and going, what should I what is your inspiration? What should I do? And really, it was the same. It's your choice. It's up to you to explore. I remember feeling really nervous going, oh God, I've got to make this decision now.
Yeah.
And of course, what you rely is on your friends, your
Yes.
network, and ask people the questions. And the only reason I chose engineering was because of the way it was told to me, and when I was reading online, was you get to look under the hood of things. I went, this is good.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to love this because I'm going to understand how things work. And so that's why I really chose that path.
Yeah, great. And if I'm right in thinking you actually returned to India?
I did return.
University?
Yeah.
So how was that? Because you've spent your life away from India.
Yeah.
And then you've kind of returned. How did you kind of adapt to? It's different to going on holiday.
Yeah,
right.
of course. Yes.
Yes. What did that look like for you?
I always felt as a tourist going back.
Yeah.
Even going back for my holidays. Of course, roots back in India. My parents always tried to make sure that we understood the culture back in India. But going for holidays, I always felt as a tourist because everything felt different.
Yeah.
The ways of how people would work and everyday life would feel different. But again, because of schooling, where I'd been used to the concept of seeing different cultures, I always took it as this is how people do things.
Yeah.
Very different when you go back and you embed yourself in the culture. What I really liked was going back. And I did, in between, there was when the Gulf War took place for a very short time, for about a year. I did go back to study in India for my just one grade. Mm-hmm. And then after the invasion was complete, my dad got a call to come back to Kuwait, and then the family moved back. So I had a little bit of a taste, but I was very early then. But I didn't know this, and I'm still in touch with the friends that I made in school, that when I went back to do my engineering, some of those friends of mine who I'd touched when I was in school and had conversations with, they remembered me. They remembered me as this kid who came for a year, airdropped, came in, and then just left.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, so you're the person who lived in Kuwait, and what does that mean?" That was good because I did not come back to not knowing anyone. I came back to people who came up to me and said, "Were you that person who studied back in school?" So it was good. It was a really good start.
Yeah.
Thank the stars that I had. I had someone, and it was really good because that network of people are the ones who brought me into ways of working. And I'd ask the same questions again. Here's how I would do something. Yeah. Why is it that you do things this way? And they were okay to say, look, we understand that you've grown up differently, and they take the time to explore.
That's
but again, very, very grateful to that. Yeah. So that helped me, acclimatize, if that's the right word, to the culture, and to study, just coming and airdropping into engineering in a completely different country. But the other thing that it got me to do is, and this always happens in school and in undergraduation, is you start to see that there are different groups of people. And as they grow up, they probably form their own groups. Yeah. And it continues as a trend when you go into undergrad and graduation, and postgrad, where people tend to remain in their groups unless they're unless they come as an outsider. Yeah. Because I came in as an outsider, and I had people that were part of all these different groups, they almost saw me as one to all the different groups. And so I had access to all these different people and different groups, whereas most others remained in their group of friends because they knew each other and they bonded really well. Yeah. Whereas I was coming new, and so I got the ability to interact with different. And you can see some of the stories that, when I'm thinking back, it's exactly what you would do when you come into work, and how do you link into different groups and different sets of people. So that's the other lesson that
it's an interesting point. I've talked to a couple of guests about this, where they maybe in their childhood moved around a lot, around the world or around the country, wherever it was, or just different schools, but that early experience of the kind of pro-social behavior, having to quickly make friends, develop friendships, adapt, really does, without even knowing it, innately set you up as a transferable skill for because you're kind of role playing it to a certain degree at that point in life, right? As in testing what works and what doesn't work, and kind of who you are. What were you thinking? What were you kind of thinking career-wise at that point when you were at university?
Yeah, and so the first one is grade 12, going into what you're going to choose. I'm sure everyone who's done this is that nerve-wracking moment of have you made the right choice? Right? Yeah. And it's the same. I was doing my undergraduation, and the concept of should I pursue my master's at that point? Should I go and do a career? I had no clue, to be honest, at that point. But all I remember was, again, inspiration. So I remember this very clearly, that I was sitting in a computers class in my engineering, and it was a professor, and just the ability to storytell and inspire the people around him on picking up this really complex world of computer programming and understanding computers. And I fell in love just because I had a background of, tinkering and not putting things together. But the way he taught, that got me very inspired to understand a little more about programming and how things worked at an application level. And I think he had an influence for what I was going to do next in my career, because I really loved that class. Yeah. And I remember picking more and more units related to that computer degree, the computer class. And that then, as I was reaching a point of what to do next, I just had to sit back and reflect on what I loved most. Yeah. And I could see there was a clear winner, and the inspiration was just because of that professor of mine. That I said, look, I want to do something in computers. Now, at that point, there was the advent of the internet. There was computers that were becoming mainstream, but there was not much of a discipline in the world of security and some of the other areas which we talked about. But all I knew then was I like this. I like computers. I like the hardware part of it. I like what I've heard in university about programming. And can we mix the two together to look at an option for where I should work? So that set the inspiration. What I did do, and often, if I tell this to people that ask me questions on how do you enter the world of technology, I did this, and sure, many people have different paths. But after I finished university, I didn't directly jump into my first job.
No, I spotted that. It looked like there was a 2-year gap.
Yes.
That was one of my questions. Yeah. I'm always interested in the gaps more than the stuff that you can see. So what happened in those 2 years?
Yeah. So I chose I took a decision not to take on my first job, and I think it still happens today, but at that point we had campus placement. So you'd have these really amazing companies come in and talk about what the company is, and then you had to do your campus placement interviews to get through. And I don't think I did any of them. And I remember the peer pressure, because the others were going, what are you going to do next if you don't choose this path? And I said, look, I want to study a little more because I was truly inspired in the world of computers. I want to do a bit more programming. And so I looked outside university, and I didn't want to do a master's at that point. And I looked outside, and I found that there were really specialized learning companies that were popping up that were teaching you specializations in programming and networks and operating systems. And I remember saying, okay, I'm going to take a course. It's still there today. It was called C programming. Yeah. And I said, I'm going to take this course, take 6 months, and do a very focused dive into the world of C programming. But I remember going to the specialized learning company, and then being exposed to all these other programs that they had, and I was just like a fish absorbing everything I could in this world. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up doing a whole bunch of different courses, not knowing then how it would affect my first job. Yeah. And so I ended up doing programming. I did a whole course on networking, operating systems, and again, I just remember that learning and I don't think they exist today, but that learning company had the first ever batch for computer hacking. And it was called the course, and still today the course still exists. It's called Certified Ethical Hacker. And I went, I wonder what this is. And they were literally giving it out to say, can you please be the first batch? And so they had asked their students. And it's, again, luck, right time, right place, and being open to the idea of going, look, I'd love to try this.
Yeah.
And so the 6 months that I'd said I'll take a break and do a course ended up being a 1-year-long program of doing all these different courses and topping it off with a
I can imagine through that, as you say, the exposure to so many different aspects of tech and people with the same curiosity that no doubt had other kind of interests and passions that would have exposed you to that you never would have met if you just dropped into the place of work and kind of put that pressure on yourself.
Yeah, that was one, of course. Everyone who had the curiosity was there. You had people who were exposed to the world of computers, who were really teaching you and had worked in industry, who were coming in and giving you a look into what the world of computers would be in companies, but they had lived experiences, which I really, again, cherished from. And the other thing I loved was you were really working on technology, which, you know, universities at that point didn't really have. You're working on technology which was out there.
Bleeding edge,
right?
It's interesting because it kind of reminds me a bit of what an organisation like General Assembly does now.
Yeah. True.
Where they're specifically away from your kind of structured mainstream education.
Yeah.
They're creating courses based on what's real, what's happening.
Yes.
Bringing people together, giving them skills.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. That's what it sounds like. As a kind of I guess a contemporary analogy.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I did do a course in General Assembly very recently, and you're right. It's still the flavor is it gives you the experiential understanding of what's really there in companies. And universities have to teach a very foundational, structured approach. And doing these specialized courses, again, if you have the option and it's open, I really encourage for people to do it. But that taught me a lot because I had this lived experience. I was talking to people who had come in from companies who've done the things, and you're working on bleeding edge tech. And you're literally trying things out. I remember I did a course in networking. They had switches at that point, and you're really plugging into switches. Again, trying code out, which may or may not work, but you're getting exposed to it. So the trial and the experimentation before going into a company was what really helped me. And I said, you think of it afterwards and go, wow, that point in my career was really, really helpful. Taking the time off and doing some specialized courses.
That's great. So again, I think the takeaway there is that don't be in a rush.
Yes.
Particularly at that point in your life, take some time if you can afford it.
Yes.
To expose yourself to the world and away from mainstream education potentially.
Yes.
And I did see that after that, then you did take your first job, which with Protiviti, which is the old Arthur Andersen business that I think was acquired. And I saw that role was in the Middle East. So I assume at that point, was that back in Kuwait, or was that somewhere else in the Middle East where you?
Yes, it was, and we'll talk about that now. So I think I completed my engineering back in India. Took some time off to do the specialized courses. And then the next question came along is, what do I do next? And where in the world should I do this? Now, my parents were still back in Kuwait.
Okay.
And of course, I was, by then, about 5 or 6 years apart from them. And I really knew that what would happen in my career going forward. And listening to people, again, who had families who migrated and then moved around the world. I knew there would be points later on in my career where I might not have the frequency to be with family. And so I had to make a decision whether I would continue where I was or whether I should move closer to home. And I chose that decision was mainly to be with family. And I chose the decision to go back to Kuwait, find an opportunity there to work. And the reason strongly was to come back and be with my mom and dad. And that's where what was the value of taking the time to do the course really paid out. I remember applying, and today you've got the world of LinkedIn and Seek and agencies that really, really specialize in this. At that point, most of it wasn't there. And I know we were talking about this before with job boards and posting, and I remember trying to send out, I had faxes going out with your resume. Not many companies had emails, email systems for sending out emails, trying everything that you would today, but to reach out and say, hey, I'm here. What I remember is getting a call from Protiviti, which had just, it was going through its Arthur Andersen days. And they called me and said the director at that point was very keen and wanted to meet me. And it wasn't for an interview. They said, we really want to meet you. And so I remember coming to their office and, of course, very nervous, first interview in the real world. And sitting down with the director, and the first question he asked me is exactly what you asked, Anton, is the 2-year gap.
Yeah.
He said, I've never seen someone come in with all of these discipline skills already on their resume. Yes, I've seen people come out from university, finish the degree, look out for opportunities, but I've never seen, at least he was saying then, I don't know if he was being nice to me or just, very open. He said, I've never seen someone come out of university, take the time then, do all these specialized courses, and it looks from you're very focused on what you want to get and why. And he said, it's consulting then, I was external consulting. He said, if I were to put this and build a little slide, it would look exceptional for the company. And so he said, I'd love for you to join, but I'd really want to know why you chose the decision of taking 2 years. And I told him then it was just me being very inquisitive in the world. It was nothing to do with, hey, I'm going to go for this consulting company and get the role. But he said not many people do it. And he said, what that saves me now is that you've got some experience that is cutting edge and what industry really wants. And I can almost transfer the skills, and your learning curve to join the company is much lower. And so that really set the thing, because I remember then having that interview going, oh, wow, I didn't think about it, coming really excited home and telling mom and dad that, they said, great. This is good. You chose.
It's a great position to negotiate your salary too.
Yeah, true.
What did that role involve, working as a consultant?
Yeah.
How did you what was a typical day?
Yes. So back then I didn't know what the world of consulting was. I just heard it, did your research when you come in for an interview going, I wonder what Protiviti is and what it does. Of course, in the interview process, I got asked a question of what do you think we do. I think I answered it, but there's a lot more you understand once you join and work. My first typical role when I joined was they took me straight into the world of banking. And it comes a full circle because my dad was in the world of banking, and they said, look, we've got this project. We've got a really good team there. You've got some experience in what you've done. We'd love for you to come and join this team and work with the team in security.
Right.
And I just went, okay. The max I know is this course that I've done in certified ethical hacking, but I'd love to join. And again, just being directly introduced into an unknown world. And this comes back a full circle again about being introduced to a different culture, different people, different ways of working.
Yeah.
But it all played back because I was very comfortable through my early years of going into unknown cultures and just understanding things. So what is the world of consulting? I think it's really that your day-to-day will never be the same.
Yeah.
You could be one moment in a project with a particular client doing a really different piece of work, and literally in about a day or 2 days or sometimes a couple of months doing something completely different.
Okay.
And as you progress in your career in consulting, you'd get more different slices of working, but also what starts to happen is you're context switching a lot more as you're growing in that career path in consulting.
Yeah.
And so I remember, early on having, hey, this is your client today, you're going to work, and then a month or 2 months later, the client would change.
Yeah.
But I could see that change and client association becoming a lot more as I started to grow in the world of consulting. So you're right. A typical day of consulting, if I summarize it, it's the excitement of going into an unknown,
Yeah.
understanding very quickly what the culture of the organization is and what the project really is. There's what's written in what the briefing of the project is, but then there's also understanding what the client really wants.
Yeah.
And then knowing that you've got to do that very quickly. But then again, your frame of reference could change and context could change as well. And then being able to adapt to it.
Absolutely. I was going to say you're on a very expensive clock.
Yes.
But from the client perspective.
True.
But I think that's kind of what I hear when I speak with people that have worked in consulting. True. Is you become very adaptable.
Yes.
And you appreciate hitting the ground running very quick.
Very quick.
Identifying the problem and starting to quickly develop solutions.
Yes.
They don't always have to be the perfect solution, but you've got to start ideating pretty quick.
It's true. And the other aspect is bringing everyone along the journey, and especially when it's your client, right?
Yeah,
so you can do the solution in a silo, but if you don't have a buy-in, the client will go, I'm not really happy. So how do you build? And it's no different from consulting and doing a role that's in the internal part of an organization. Yep. It's the same, bringing people along the journey of what have you discovered, what aspects of it are important, why does it add value, and you'll have conversations, people will have views, but how do you bring all of those views together, right?
But it's interesting, when we talked about your childhood and that kind of diversity and meeting people and etc. It was innate to you because you were immersed in it. Similar here, you've come from university, your first job's in consulting.
Yeah.
So for you, it's easy to translate that straight into being part of an internal team.
Yes.
But potentially for people that haven't had that experience of being in front of a customer 6 months into a job post-university.
Yes.
And being, what's the problem? I need you to fix it. That's quite confronting.
It is.
And does sharpen you up, I think, on the kind of stakeholder skills.
Yeah.
The soft skills, let's say, beyond the technical.
Yeah, it's true.
I also noticed, so you spent just over 5 years with that organisation, 3 promotions.
Yeah.
So what, when you look back now, what kind of set you up for that success?
One was this idea to understand culture very quickly.
Yeah.
The ability to pick up what the problem is between the lines of a statement of work or a briefing. Yeah. To actually understand what the client is really looking for. And, it's as simple as asking the questions. So being curious and asking the questions, really listening to what the client has to say. And when we say client, it's not one person really. It's a group of people, right? So understanding that, translating it, communicating it back, really important. And the idea to being not nervous about change. So having different projects come at you and going, hey, can you pick this up because I'm really busy doing something else, and going, interesting, I will. Yeah. I am open to it. The idea of being open to, if it doesn't go well, it's okay. So the culture, most of this comes back to how your childhood is a culture of safety.
Yeah.
And I had, again, some truly inspirational people around me who were okay for me to try and okay for me to go, I think I'm way out of my depth and I need help. But then only stepping in when that's required, allowing me to explore. So the idea, to your question, Anton, the idea of saying, be open to receiving opportunities, be open for feedback, which is common. It's, you need this any point in your career. But having that yes mindset, especially early on in your career, to say, look, I'm open. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, but I will find a way, right? Yeah. I think that's really, really important for consulting.
Yeah, great. And after you left Protiviti, you then randomly moved to Melbourne, which is obviously the logical move most people would have done at that point. But why? Why Australia? I'm sort of obviously joking. But why Australia? Why that move? And what was kind of going on for you to make that decision?
Yeah. So, if I come back to Protiviti and the work I was doing there, I think I started off in Kuwait, but by the end, the 5 years stint, I was moving across the Middle East.
Yeah, okay.
I was traveling to different, and I loved it. I still think I'm a born consultant.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I loved the opportunity of flying to client briefings, going to different countries. Again, as you go into a different country, it's different culture, it's different organizational structures. But I loved all of it. I would soak all of it in. I'd love the opportunity. I'd remember there were situations where I'm literally being told one evening that you're going to have to be on a flight to a different country. And the question you naturally ask is, okay, which client am I going to and what is the briefing? They go, don't worry about it, we'll tell you. And then literally catching a flight and then being handed a document to say, here's the client and here's your brief. And reading it very quickly on the plane to go, I need to be in a meeting in about 2 hours with the client, and reading it as quickly as you could go. But that introduced to me the idea that the borders of how we operate in the world today don't really exist much. You can work in different countries. Companies, are nothing but an association of different people with different cultures, and you can work wherever you can. So that really helped me to go, the world is where you can work. It's not, I have to be in this country and I have to do this particular role. The question of why Melbourne? I think that, to be honest, when I looked at it and I said, right, I can choose anywhere. One of the things that I wanted to do as I was working more in leadership towards the tail end of Protiviti was, as I was having conversations with very senior leaders, I started to realize that, great, I love the technology aspect of what I do. I love strategy and technology, but now I'm talking to people from disciplines of finance, marketing, human resources, and very senior people. And to understand the why for them was very important for me. How can I say something that is very technical in nature that has to be done, but the why doesn't, for them, the why is very different, right? Because they're looking at it very differently. And so that got me thinking, what should I do next? And how should I learn? And, I said, what I should do next is take some time off and try to pivot into really understanding more broader than just technology. And so I said, right, I'm going to do a degree, a master's degree. And I did have a point there to choose, because I said, should I continue down a technical degree? But I realized in my conversations that I was having, I could, but I'm never going to understand the mindset of what other people think from different disciplines. And what is there out there that would give me that? And so I started to hone in on leadership programs that were out there. Now, at that point, there weren't many executive leadership programs that were, short courses that you could do. There were all these broad courses like an MBA that you could do. And I started looking. And I looked at every country that I could get my hands on. I knew the culture that I'd already been in. So I'd been in the Middle East for a while, and I said, okay, this is good. I think for the time I've been here, I've understood how the business operates. I had my engineering back in India, and I said, this is, I've got an understanding. So now I want to look at cultures outside where I want to embed myself for a while. And so, yes, it was open for me. I did look at the US. I did look at Europe. I did look at Australia. And it's exciting because the world's your oyster, but it's also a little scary because you've got choice, right? And choice can be sometimes compounding for you to make a decision. So I remember having all the options to choose a program, and there's some amazing programs around the world. But I think the change for me was when I started to go and meet the different schools, and they had, you had all these different schools come up and set up education, what was it called? It was called education zones, where you could go and interact with the people from the school and understand the why again as to what would you get from doing this course. And so I remember I went to these education zones for the US and Europe and Australia. And again, it was a pivot moment for me when I met someone, and until today I keep in touch with a professor then who had come into one of these education zones, but now is a very good friend of mine and is a director in Monash. And his name's Paul Calfidelis. Amazing personality and an amazing teacher. And he set without knowing it, because I just went up to him and said, look, I love this program that you have at Monash. I'd like to understand more. But the way he approached and communicated what it meant to me was the inspiration for going, all right, I'd love to do Monash. So it wasn't Melbourne, really. It was the university and really Paul who influenced me to pick up the program.
Yeah.
And then it's only after that I went, all right, I need to understand what Australia is a little more and what does Melbourne really mean. But yeah, I think I landed in Australia and Melbourne and Monash mainly because of Paul and the inspiration he gave me compared to some of the other universities that I'd spoken to.
It's interesting. I was just sort of making a note there as I was listening to you talk. Throughout the story you've shared so far, people have been so influential.
Yeah.
In a good way, as in, they've really helped shape you and direct you from your high school teacher, through your parents and Protiviti and now here as well with Monash. And I think it's very easy for people to look at tech and think it's all very rational. Yeah. It's very, very black and white, very factual, and you follow a path and it's very technical, but you still need those guides to kind of give you the path or show you the path for you to follow. So how did you adapt to life in Australia?
I think, again, because I had the background, and now to add to it, I had a career in consulting where it's completely unknown to very quickly moving it to known. I felt coming into university, I felt very at home, which was very weird to say because it's a different country, a different place, a different culture. But I didn't feel the challenge. But I remember talking to my cohort and talking to other people, and there is the nerves of, okay, I'm coming into a country, it's completely unknown, how people operate and how people interact, a very different style of culture.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel that, because I almost felt like I'd always been doing interactions with different people and different cultures that I went, this is fine. It's another part of the program. I was very focused and very excited of being able in my career to take time off, which again, it's humbling that I had that opportunity. I had people that encouraged me to take the time off and really focus on leadership. And having now done, about 10 years in the corporate life, to know what I really wanted from this leadership program. And so I was more focused on, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to take all the time I can to understand leadership because I knew that's what I wanted. And so I was really focused on that. And I could see through that, to understanding leadership, it's the talking to people and communicating to different people with different backgrounds and different experiences that taught me a lot more. Yes, the course was amazing. Yes, you learned the fundamentals, but I cherished more the conversations that I had with people there and the networks that I built. With even today, I still go back and lean on. So yeah, it wasn't hard, but I should always say that people who were in my cohort who didn't come from that background of in mixing with cultures and found it, took some more time to adapt, but I was lucky.
That's interesting. Again, a couple of guests we've had, we've talked about postgraduate study, and it's more than the learning. It is the networks you make. It's meeting people that have experienced different things, different organizations. Plus, you've got your own experience of being in the workplace that you can then share and talk about those things. So I think that is much more holistic. That's probably what I'm trying to say. In terms of what that looks like.
And I don't. Again, it's reflection. Reflection's always very powerful. I could have had two parts. One was choose to do to come here and actually pursue a career directly, or take the path of learning and going through that part. And I often talk to people who've come the other way, which is, hey, I've been working overseas for a very long time, and now I'm going to transition into working in a different country. the network effect which you get when you're doing a course and you're taking some time off, and you're again with other people who've also committed to take time off and learn the program, and it's almost like you're together in a little cohort, right? And you're all doing this together. You form very strong bonds. Versus if you came in directly to do I could have done that, as I was saying before, coming and doing working directly. I feel like it's hard to tell because I could wind back the clock and choose a path of just coming into corporate career here in Australia. But talking to people who've done that versus coming in and studying and then going into corporate, I felt it added more value because you've formed stronger bonds with other people who are doing the same and who've chosen the path to take some time off and learn. And also learn and build the networks. That really had an effect.
Look, I agree with you. I've migrated twice in my life. I moved to the US and then moved from the US to here. And when I reflect back now, I was very naive to thinking that the world of business or the world of life was going to be similar in all those places. And it takes time to adapt. And I remember being very surprised when I got to Australia at how relationship orientated this country is and social in a good way. But that's very different to the US. And I had to learn how to adapt. And I can also relate to your comments about your studying of the MBA and making those networks. I did a master's as an adult, part-time, University of London, and that involved a certain number of in-person lectures and weekends and so forth. But what I found, probably personally at that point in my life, my motivation to study was very different to when I was 18. And at that point, you're kind of on the machine, the treadmill, as in you finish high school, you go to university. It's you don't ever really stop to think about why you're studying or your motivation to study. It's you're just following the process. And what I think I found is going back to study at about 30, I think I was at that point in my life. Everyone else was also highly motivated to be there. They were interested in the study. They wanted to do the assignments. They wanted to make connection too. But there was it's a very different learning experience. And I wasn't ready at 18 and at that point to study to that depth. I had all sorts of other interests and things that I wanted to explore in life, and I would have gone and never come up with the same kind of experience. So I think that there's all those factors. And I think when you come together to learn with people with the same motivation, it's incredibly inspiring.
And it's true, and I'm sure this happens to you all the time, is you get people come up and say, hey, you've had this career. I can see there are parts of this in your experience that I'm at that point in my life now and I need to make a decision. And I often get the tough question going, should I pursue a degree online? Because then I've got the world of online. Should I pursue a degree in person? Should I do it full-time? Should I do it part-time? When should I take some time off to do a degree? Should I take a time off to do a degree? And one of the things I always say, and you're right, Anton, it's really powerful for you to, if that's the path you want to take, is to take some experience out of life first. Whether it's a career experience, it's exploring the world. Because then when you come back to do your next, whatever it may be, to study and pursue, you know exactly what you want. And so that's I generally give that advice to people going, what do I do next? I've seen you've taken this point in your career. Should I follow that path? I say, let's take a step back and see if what you really want. Right?
That's exactly right.
That's,
when I remember vividly when I first returned to study, and I kind of made a pact with myself that if I ever started turning in substandard work, or stopped doing the reading, or attending the lectures, or doing the background work, I'd stop because no one had a gun to my head. No one was making me do this. It was on myself. And I think by the time I finished my master's, I was ready to stop again. I'd had enough of that experience. But it's a different kind of commitment, and I think that's what's interesting.
And you hold yourself to that standard, right? And it's scary because you're holding yourself to that standard of motivation and what you want to do next. But it's also very empowering, right? Because it's your own destiny and you're making those choices completely. So it has both sides of it. But I think it helps you choose the paths you want to take, especially when you're in control.
That's right. After sort of finishing up with the MBA, I saw you briefly worked as a contractor, but then you joined KPMG,
Yeah.
Another great consulting firm. So why did you pick KPMG? I guess first and foremost, and what did you take away from that experience?
So there's two parts to it, really, as to why I chose KPMG. One was if I came back to doing the executive MBA, I had this opportunity, this amazing opportunity to spend 2 years and really dedicate to learning what I chose to learn more about leadership and explore. And I remember again, and I did this in consulting and did it in while learning the executive MBA, is to never say no to an opportunity or a challenge. And so everything that came my way, I said yes to. I remember at that point, there were different executive programs that were almost side tracks to the MBA that you could opt into, and I just opted in for everything because I had this opportunity to do 2 years. And there were international cases that you could work on with other universities, and I remember doing projects with the UN and the Alfred Hospital, and really, really amazing because I just immersed myself to learn as much as I could. But through that, it was the networks where I got this opportunity to do some contracting work because the team that I was working with, the track was an executive leadership track. And there was someone in that, again, just an inspiration. Her name was Katia Gidley, and she still runs her program today. She looked at how I was approaching things, and she was very inspired by the idea. And I didn't know anything else. That's just my nature. And she came up to me and said, look, I'd love for you, once you complete your program, to come and work for us as part of this team, because A, you're an inspiration to just everyone else to hear your story, but B, would love the approach that you had. And so that was Sagacity and me joining Sagacity there. And I remember day one, post-graduating, the first role I had at Sagacity was to go and look at the student experience, funny enough, as people coming into university and what the student experience really is. And I remember standing at the front doors of, I think, Swinburne at that time and welcoming students. But it was a consulting experience again. I was a consultant understanding the role of someone coming in to really understand the pain points that a student had. And it's nerve-wracking to come into a different university in a different world, especially if you're international or even if you're domestic, but understanding that. And I love that. Again, I think I'm a born consultant sometimes. I love that idea. And so I was doing that. And then from there, I started to work on understanding the education system and understanding the technology behind it to see if we could remove bottlenecks to improve the experience. So while I was doing that, it was the network effect. So while I was doing that, I had someone that I met through my career in Protiviti. And funny enough, at that point, and his name, again, I'll drop a lot of people that really inspired me and helped me along my way. It was Abbas Kudrati. And Abbas, I remember, but the first time I met him at Protiviti, he was in a different consulting firm, and we were both on different bidding teams, and we were bidding against each other.
Yeah, right.
And I remember I still remember him saying, "You're not going to win this bid because we've got this pat." And I said, "Well, let's see." Yeah. Anyway, but it was friendly banter. Yeah. But we remained connected, and I followed his career path. He was, he's doing really well today. He's at Microsoft, but I followed his career path. He kept following mine. And he, through a completely different path, landed in Australia, and I did. And he got tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, we're starting an internal team in KPMG, and there's no external consulting. I joined, the role that he joined was to build the internal security team at KPMG. And he reached out to me, and he said, look, they've given me this opportunity. I'd love for you to come and work. Would you be okay moving from someone that was in competition with me to actually working as part of the team? And I was working at Sagacity at that time, and I said, let me think about it. I love what I'm doing at Sagacity. Yeah. And he said, look, I know you've been doing consulting for a very long time. It's very different now that you've got the skills and the understanding of being in the consulting world, it's very different when you're running internal teams because you've got to drive a lot more. You're no longer the consultant that's being paid top dollar. You're part of the team. It's very different. And I can see through your career that you don't have that experience. It would be good for you to come in and work in the team. And so that got me thinking to say, actually, it's true. I've done external consulting. I've advised teams. I've built strategy. I've helped internal teams drive certain outcomes, but I've never been an internal team.
Yeah.
And so that's my reason why. I mean, two, I was very lucky to be given that opportunity by Abbas. Yeah. But also it got me thinking of, okay, this is going to be a different challenge because I've never worked in a consulting practice, which is good, but on the internal side now trying to drive strategy and building.
So it's interesting because you look at your resume, your profile, your LinkedIn, you assume that would have been consulting.
Yeah, it's true.
With the name above the door. Yeah. Was there any temptation in that time to kind of nudge towards the consulting side, or did you quite enjoy being in that internal focus role?
What I didn't realize when I took on the role, and I remember Abbas, the way he sold it to me, he said, look, come in for a year, help me build a team, and then you can go do what you want next. And 5 years later, I was still working at KPMG because of the complexity. The complexity of building a team for a very large organization, not easy. Buy-in, getting stakeholder buy-in internally when you're the team, getting budgets approved, a lot of work. But I didn't realize then that because I had the consulting background, the consulting side of KPMG, the cyber consulting side, would reached out internally and said, look, you've got this background. You now have both sides of the coin. You've worked externally in consulting and you've got internal experience now. Can you work with us to build out what this practice should look like? We're doing well. We think we're doing okay, but you having both sides of the coin will really help us. Yeah. So I loved it. I mean, I said, I never thought it would. The experience would play out that way. I was just very open to the idea.
It's interesting because I was actually thinking you're building an internal capability for consultants.
Yes.
So you're consulting the consultants.
It's true.
I mean, if that's poacher turned gatekeeper, poacher. I don't even know what the analogy is for that, but I can imagine that's pretty challenging.
It was because we had, I started to go, how can we, I knew what it was in the world of consulting. One of the things I often picked was you'd have a lot of people who didn't have experience in consulting, especially when you're early on in your career, and also didn't have the experience in running internal teams that were now going and advising clients. And I went, there is an opportunity here because we now have an internal practice. We almost call it ground zero. Yeah. How powerful would it be when you have consultants that are coming in early on in their career to have some experience internally?
Yeah, okay.
Now, it brought value to us as an internal team because we now had people that could help us as well build the practice and learn along with us. Yeah. They loved it because they had ground zero experience. So now when they go into their clients, they could communicate going, hey, look, we're not telling you the strategy, but just because we think it's good, we've lived it. Yeah. And so I didn't think of it that way, but I looked at what did I go through when I started? What were the people around me when they started consulting? And to almost use that gap that I saw to say, look, let's provide that. Let's provide that atmosphere for people to come in and learn. And so it was good. It was really, really powerful. Mm-hmm. The cyber practice loved the idea. We loved the idea as well because we got cross-skilling. Yeah. The other thing we also did is often people, and I hear this today, is people love the world of consulting, but they don't really know what it entails. They go, wow, it's amazing to be a consultant. You come in, set strategy, and off you go, right? And so it allowed me to give the opportunity to internal people in KPMG to see the world of consulting as well. So we do a cross-skill. Yep. So we'd get consultants to come in and work and gain the experience internally, but we also had internal people go and live the day in the life of a consultant. Yeah. So I love that. I think it's a brilliant model. I think companies that have a consulting arm and an internal arm should really use the model. Yeah. But it was good. People loved it, loved the idea. So
you moved on after 5 years, another 3 promotions as well. I'm gonna just add. Why did you move on?
It was the 1-year promise that led to 5 years. So, so Abbas said, look, stay for a year, build the team out. But, as I said, it's a lot more work in such a large practice. I think at that point, in about 5 years, could I have done more work? Yes, there was a lot more to do. But what I started to realize is the next team that we had built out was, because I was probably day 2 for the security team, a lot of the business would come to me often. And I didn't really, while it was empowering for me, I didn't really like the concept because I wanted to nurture the next generation of leaders. Yeah. And I'd often say, look, thank you for coming to me, but you need to talk to person X, and often try the delegation approach. But it was still that people go, we know who you are, you were here from day 1, can we come and talk to you? And so I almost felt like I was starting to become the point of contact and not allowing the team to grow. That was one. And so I said it would be really powerful if I moved, because now there's no Sunil that someone can come to. They can now go to the team directly. The second was I went, look, it was 1 year, it's 5 years now, done the big rocks. I need the team to grow, and I need to look at what I should be doing next. And so that was the other aspect for me to go and look at where my next inspiration should be. I think in that time, Abbas moved on to do his next role, but I had another inspirational leader, Mark Layton, I still know him today, who came in to do the CISO role. And he and I would have conversations, and he said, look, you've done some amazing work. We will always empower you to continue, but you need to also start thinking about what you want to do, and do you want to be here for the next 10 years? If you do, we'd help you. And that inspiration, that inflection point got me to think, one is to come back and help the team to grow. Second, for me also to think about what my next step should be in my career. And it was people like Mark and Abbas saying, look, you need to now go, it's your next role. Those were the things that got me to think about where I should go next.
Again, I think it's good when in those situations where you've got an inspirational leader that's saying, we can make this work here for you for as long as you want, but potentially the time is to move on for your next growth. And you joined Serve, where you are today. What kind of drew you to that role?
So and what's funny, Serve, it's got a really big name. It's called Secure Electronic Registries Victoria.
Rolls off the tongue.
It rolls off the tongue. We shortened it to Serve. But when I joined, it wasn't Serve. It was Victoria Land Registry Services. And I think I joined 2 years into privatization. So Victoria Land Registry Services had just privatized from the government. When I say privatized, the government handed a 40-year lease, or we call it a concession deed, to Serve, and Serve is owned 100% by Aware Super. So it handed Aware Super a 40-year lease to run as a private operator the business of Victoria Land Registry Services, as it was known today. When that role came up, they were looking, because one of the things that happened is a government entity got privatized. And I remember, and there's news articles about this, when it got privatized, the people of Victoria were a bit nervous that you've got some very confidential information that's being handed to a private operator. And so by hearing the conversations that the citizens of Victoria had, I think the government decided to create a concession deed that had a very large aspect of security in it. And so the reason that role excited me was when VLRS, or Serve as it's known today, approached. They said, look, we've got this concession deed and it has a lot of requirements for security, very heavy, compliance driven. We can see that you've set up a team at KPMG. Would you mind coming in and helping us unpack what's required for security? We are very nervous that we could very quickly dive into this security world and make it much bigger than it is, and it might not be right for the business. So can you come and right size what's required? And I said, this is interesting. I had by then, a lot of experience working with government, but not with governments in Australia. So I said, this is good. It's you have a regulator that's the government. You've got a really high energy company that's just been privatized, that's got very strong motivations to do well. And they've just been handed this really intense concession deed document that has a lot of aspects of security, and they're looking for someone to unpack it. So I love the complexity
it ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I used to say it's something you can put your own stamp on.
Yeah.
You can take the learnings from KPMG and but also develop yourself in a new way. And there was something you kind of touched on there as well, which was the kind of nervousness of the public, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think that was another question I was keen to explore with you today, that cyber is now a household name in terms of people are aware when there's breaches, it makes the news, it's significant for the right reasons, obviously, right? That's not anything other than that. But I'm just interested, actually, I guess my perspective as cyber is when you do it well, no one knows what you do.
Yep.
And when it goes wrong, everyone knows what you do. So you're kind of on hiding to nothing, so to speak, with what you do. But I'm interested what excites you about cybersecurity right now?
Yeah, again, reflecting, I remember this, that when I joined in consulting, some of the first roles were, in finding out security issues. It was it's fancy term today is red teaming, but then it was pen testing and things like that. And I remember, you rightly said that cyber was not really something that was very known, talked about as much. There were aspects of it happening in the background. But I remember, and this is how far we've come as in the world of cyber, is going and presenting a report on, here are the different things in cyber that you as an organization need to do. And while they went, oh, this is great.
Yep.
We don't understand the technical aspects of this. Most of the times it would be a report that would be shelved in the background with the rest of things. That has changed.
Yep.
That world has changed so much today. And I had things in my career where we would present and I would see that it was not sticking onto the business and they didn't really understand the importance of it. And, here's someone who's going, you have to do this. And it connects back to why I said maybe I'm not speaking the leadership language, and I need to do something more to train. But I think today, fast forward, anything about a security issue or a security event, and everyone's there. Everyone wants to know, and there is really focused attention on how can we remove the risk associated with cyber. So that's good. So for people who are coming in or people transitioning into doing a world in cyber, you don't have to worry about some of the work we used to do to try and get the companies excited about cyber. That's completely gone now. So I love that. I love that cyber has the attention of not just the company, but right at the board levels and right at your audit risk and stakeholder and even external customers. You don't have to do that. You have the attention.
Yeah.
Now what you're trying to do is then go, how can we provide the information for the company in a way that it can be taken, bite-sized, and actually drive value to the company. So I love that. I love that aspect of cyber. There's so many parts.
So that's the consultant you coming out.
Yeah, it's actually true, right?
Yeah.
It's actually true. I said I'm a born consultant, I think. So it's that aspect that comes out, and I like that. I really love that. I tell organizations, I tell people, do not sell cyber from the point of fear. Because you can take that approach, but very quickly then, it's, oh my God, the cyber team's here, and the cyber team's here to just lock things down and close your doors and don't do business, right? That's a very wrong approach.
The business prevention team.
Yeah, business, true, right? And you often get, oh my God, the cyber team's here. That's not the way you drive cyber today. Cyber is about helping the business run faster. I often use, and it's not me that said this, is cyber is like the brakes of a car. And people often go, brakes of a car help you slow down the car, but it's not. It actually helps you go faster because you now know that there's a brake in the car that can help you. In the event you go too quickly, you can apply the brakes. I love that. I heard that somewhere else. And that's a really good way to say, think of cyber as a way to build the guardrails for a company so they can do what they do best and really do it in a safe and secure manner. So that's the way you need to create cyber. Don't use it as the police coming down your door and knocking things and the business prevention team, as you call it. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to ask you, I guess, a few more kind of broad questions around kind of career experiences or career advice. Maybe a strange question. If you weren't in security, what would you be doing in tech right now?
It's funny. Two things that we didn't talk about. One was in the background I was doing security and technology. I was a gamer.
Okay.
And I used to game quite a bit in the online world. And there was the point when I was choosing my executive leadership where I said, should I just completely pivot and go into the world of gaming? And I remember looking up courses on gaming, and there was game programming and game design. I really loved it. So that was one. And the other world I loved was robotics. And just understanding how machines could be programmed to do certain things. And I know it's come so much now with AI and machine learning. So yeah, funny that I wouldn't go too far away from the tree of technology, but if I were to do something different, maybe animation and game design, or maybe robotics. And I don't know where that would.
I thought maybe you wanted to be a professional gamer.
Oh, professional gamer.
You see these sports teams now.
Yeah, I've been looking at that. I know the only thing with I actually looked at it seriously, and the only reason I went, I can't do this, is there's a certain age with which you can be a pro gamer. And after that, and it's in most things with athletics and sports, is there's a very finite age, and after that point you can't be elite.
There must be a veterans league.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Esports veterans league. If there's not, we should invent it.
I should look it up. Maybe there is, but yeah. So that would be me in a different world, a pro gamer, or maybe a game designer, or robotics. Maybe
there's still time.
Oh, there's still time. Yeah, you never know. You could pivot.
What are you most proud of in your career?
I think I'm most proud of seeing the next generation of people.
Yeah.
And really, it's probably where I am in my career, but just to see the next generation of people succeed and do well in the paths that they've chosen. Yeah. And in my career, what I'm proud of is there have been moments like that where I've gone, oh my God, you're doing so well. I'm so happy that I've been part of your journey. To see where you are today. I find it most exciting, even here at Serve today. We've just launched a little bit of a program on cybersecurity, cyber champions, the things that businesses do. But what I really found more inspiring is not the program, but the person who ran the program, and to see him grow and really take shape and do the program. I felt very proud seeing that. It's like, when you have children and you go, wow, they've done something, right? Those are the proudest moments when I've seen people really succeed who I've known or I've had something to do or influence as part of their journey.
Yeah, great. Do you have any career regrets?
No, actually. It's the question I would put differently is, if I had to go back in time and make decisions, would I have made the same decisions?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I would have chosen every single path. I've made mistakes, but love the mistakes because I've learned from them. So no, really.
Yeah, great. We talked about feedback earlier and the importance of feedback, and I absolutely believe that you're shaped by the feedback that we receive.
True.
So what is the most significant feedback you've received in your career?
Yeah, I remember. So this was in my consulting days. And I remember I've received feedback, and I continue to receive feedback all the time. But this one shaped me because one of the things I used to do, I still today do some part of it, is being perfect in delivering something, right? And if it is delivering a proposal or delivering an outcome, I used to spend enormous amount of time, make sure for my standards that it was perfect. And I remember being pulled up by a very senior partner and saying, look, I can see that you're doing well. I can see that you've got an absolute passion to making sure that everything's perfect. But I can also see at the same time that you're burning a lot of your time and you're stressing because you want this absolute perfect thing to be delivered. And for the partner to tell me, look, it's okay.
Yeah. Right?
What you see it as perfect, someone else, 80% of that might be okay as well. Don't do it at the cost. Don't do perfectionists at the cost of being not getting good out there very quickly, or don't do it at the cost of burning yourself out.
Yeah.
Because this utopia of perfectionism you'll never have the bar. You'll keep continuing to do it. I think that was the strongest. I always come back to that. Sometimes I'll catch myself still trying to do this perfect presentation or perfect proposal, and I remember that because that really sat with me. I think that was my strongest feedback amongst the others.
That's great. Look, I think perfection's a curse, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we go through an education system where you're kind of chasing the perfect grade.
Yeah, it's true.
And then we kind of pop into work and there is no grade.
Yeah.
But that does need to be unpicked, and often getting that permission from someone and that advice. I think that's
true.
Great. If you were to give your own piece of sage advice to the next generation, what would it be?
I think it's from my experience. It is be open to try things.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to try something and go, well, I don't think that worked. Don't put too much analysis on, doing the risk reward and seeing what the benefits are. Sometimes it's okay to just jump in. Know that you've got an amazing life ahead of you. The world is such that you can pivot in your career at any time. People have done it. You get true inspirations from it. So don't be afraid to try. And it's okay to try and then go, well, I don't think that's for me. Or you might try and get truly inspired by something that you've done. So don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. I've really loved what we've talked through today, the way that I'm going to describe the way that you've paced your career and the way that you've given yourself space to learn, to develop. You've not rushed in.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot to admire there. I don't think many people I encounter, certainly through this, have done that always. They've taken challenges and stretched, and they've still probably got to a similar point. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of power to take away from your experience.
Thank you, Anton.
My final question, I'm always interested to hear what people are reading, what they're listening to. So have you got like a recommended read?
Yeah, so I do. I mean, like everyone does today in the world, I do listen to podcasts, and I do read quite a bit and listen Audible and things like that. Yeah. So in the podcast world, because I've got a background in tech and I have to keep across what's happening in the world of cyber, one that I really like is the Cloud Security podcast. It's an Australian-grown podcast. There's the Risky Business, and then Darknet Diaries. And I love Darknet Diaries because it has a little bit of a show into the world of cyber, and they've really made it into like a Netflix episode. So I really like that. It's truly in the world of reading, I do try and read and spend time away from the news articles and the cyber events. What I truly like is people that have pushed the curve on what they think should be a normal career. So the ones that I've read and really loved is Richard Branson's story, Losing My Virginity, and then Finding My Virginity. Yeah. Amazing to see how he started and the things he did. Just, true pioneer in the world, and just, going across businesses and trying to look at things. And the other one, which is completely different for me, it was to understand how the world really works and how humans, really came into being, is Sapiens by Yuval Noah. Yeah. My brother-in-law swears by this book. He's got a copy that he doesn't allow anyone to touch because it's fascinating that he's just so inspired by that book. But it really got us to think about the fundamentals of where we got to as humans, how we started. And so I think that's another great recommendation.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And again, thank you for your time today. It's been really insightful.
Thank you, Anton. Thanks for taking the time as well.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Tales from Tech Titans, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to get more insights about tech careers, then check out the Ember, that's EMMBR LinkedIn page for the latest updates, articles, and engaging discussions.